what I'm doing here is I'm going to go over the rubric and what is required. Remember also that I want you to have looked at the layout videos and things, because that is also a requirement, but right now I'm just going to mainly look at the technical requirements inside of Photoshop. So where you actually see these requirements are if you go into your Photoshop project, which you can get in through the assignments or you can get in through the module. And the things I'm going to be discussing here is, what do I mean by non-destructive or smart layers? What do I mean by documented image sources, which you should know that already. Actually, I won't go over documented image sources, but I do want to see your MLA formatted image sources in a Word document, just like for the I'd Rather Be project. Use of filters, effects, blending modes, general aesthetics, which is using and applying what it is you learned in the layout videos and in the discussion board, masking, and text. So I'm going to go over the Photoshop related items, just so you know what it is that I'm talking about. Then I will save this video and upload it to YouTube, and you'll be able to refer to it as you go through the project. Okay, so as we discussed earlier, the project is to create a movie poster. Like this was one that was done last semester. You can make a movie poster, you can make a magazine advertisement, whatever it is you choose to make, because they're basically all advertisements. But I'm not worried about the content. You can do whatever it is you want the content on. But the principles and elements of design that you learned about, that rule of thirds and proximity and, you know, things like that that you learned about in the videos, that applies to everything in design. That applies to web pages, it applies to advertisements, a lot of it applies to photography, though, you know, you can't control a lot of photography, but when you get into like the rule of thirds and things like that, that type of thing does apply. So it really doesn't matter what it is that you do, just apply every principle that relates in that particular situation. Make sense? Okay, so since I'm going to make a magazine for this particular article or this project, I don't really care what resolution you are going to do it in. However, if you are going to send an advertisement out to a printer or to a magazine, you're making it for a magazine or something like that, you are going to be told by whoever it is going to print that said advertisement what the requirements are. The lowest DPI, dots per inch, or that you would print if you make a new image. So I'm going to actually go in here and make a new image. I am going to go ahead and change this from pixels. If I was going to print it, it would be points per inch. And they're going to tell you, the printer will tell you what it is that you need to do it. If it's going to be a 300 dots per inch, which is pretty common for a printer, they will tell you these things. If you need to have CMYK color, which is what you would use for print, that's the type of thing. So even though I am not grading on that for this particular project, know that whenever you go to do something for print, who is actually specifying the size of the ad, the dots per inch, the resolution of the ad. If you're going to print to the edge, you learned about in the videos, bleed versus, what was the opposite of bleed? Frame? Bleed versus frame. That type of thing is going to be defined between you and the client and the printer. Okay? I'm not grading on all of that. But just know that if you were actually sending to a printer, that would be a consideration. But so now, I'm just going to go ahead for the purposes of this article or this video. I am just going to leave this in here, and I can go ahead and I can say I want to make it US paper size, whatever, which is going to be basically 8.5 by 11. Resolution again, 300 pixels. If I was printing that, that is what I would want. If this is something that was going to be shown on the web, eventually I would take it down to 72 pixels per inch, because that is what is shown by a lot of monitors. except for when you get onto Macintoshes and you get into that Retina display. If you're making things specifically for Retina display, your resolution is going to be a lot higher. So actually, a lot of this stuff is changing because our capabilities are changing and the devices that we use are changing.
Like a note on that, like if you do just keep it at 300 resolution,
Mm-hmm.
when you end your project completely, you can just hit file save
Right.
to the web.
Always better to work in a larger resolution, especially if your project is going to be used across the board. Typically, if you are developing for a client, they're going to take it and they're going to use whatever it is you develop to make a pamphlet, trifold pamphlets. They may use it for their web page. They may use it for whatever. So you always want to work in the largest resolution that you can, because you can always save down, but you can never save back up again. So you will save and you will work with your PSDs, work in the PSD format, which you don't see here. Now, background content here, let's talk a little bit about these. If you're making something for an advertisement, a white background is fine because typically you're going to be putting it on white. For this particular project, it is probably going to be on white because it's not going to matter. And most magazine pages and things are going to be printed on a white background. So you would select white. Now, for those of you, how many of you are in DCVM? What's the digital video and cinema? Does anybody have that major? Okay, a lot of times for you, and if you're working on the web, for instance, you're going to want to have a transparent background because things will go on top of the web page and you don't want to have a white background sitting behind it. So that's when you would choose a transparent background. For this project, I would go ahead and say white. Again, your printer is going to tell you about all of this stuff. As far as I'm concerned right now, you can work with our RGB, red, green, blue, but that is typically for web images and for anything that's going to be put on like a television set, whatever. If you are going to do something for a printer, you can work with some of these other things. Well, I think here, since I'm doing it in pixels per inch, it's RGB. It's giving me those choices. Here's working CMYK. Does anybody know what CMYK stands for? What?
Cyan, magenta, yellow, and black.
Right. And what is the difference between RGB there?
RGB is based on values of light.
Right.
And CMYK is based on values of print.
Exactly. Ink. And yes, CMYK is ink, so it's for print. RGB is for things that will be projected, shown on a monitor, or whatever. You can pretty easily nowadays flip back and forth between the two of these. But you always want to do that at the very end of your project. Don't go flipping back and forth, because every time you flip back and forth, there's little modifications that are going to be happening. It's kind of like when I'm going to say save as a PSD. You never save for web or save as JPEG in the middle of your project. Or you never get rid of the PSD. You'll always save the Photoshop format that Photoshop natively saves in, because you keep all of the information, and if the client comes back 3 months later and says change the caption on this, you've not lost it. And it's non-lossy. Every time you save as a JPEG, it loses information. We'll talk about that as we get into saving. But right now, I'm going to say that I'm making something 8.5 by 11 for a standard magazine. If you have a magazine that's a different size and you want to make an ad for that, or you're going to do, what are some of the other layouts they talked about? The half-page layouts. You know, if you want to do a half-page layout or something, that's fine. Just tell me how much it is. That's why I am not assigning a standard size on this, because depending on what it is, what magazine you want to do, or movie poster or whatever, up to you. But you should be able to tell me why you did that size, right? I'm doing a half page for the New Yorker or something like that. And this is the size that it would be. So you can pick, but be able to tell me why you picked that. Okay? Yeah, that's fine. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save this. So here is my working area, and only things that are inside of this will be shown. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to rip my tags off, or my tabs off here, and I can go ahead and shrink these up so that they're the right size and not getting inside of each other. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, select all of this, copy, move, minimize. Okay. Did I not copy? I could have sworn I copied. Okay, so where did all my stuff go? I can find it all here. So I can go ahead again, copy, copy merged. Go ahead, copy merge, that's fine. The reason why it's being slow for me is I'm kind of trying to treat it like a Photoshop document, and or like a JPEG, and it's actually a PSD. So copy, minimize. Okay, it's huge, so I'm going to go ahead and transform. Oh, so what do I mean by a non-destructive layer? What I mean here is I want you to transform it to a smart layer. Actually, I have to hit enter first. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to transform it to a smart layer or convert to a smart object. And I'm going to do that first. The reason why I want to do this first is, let's say that I zoom this all the way in. Let's say I didn't make it a smart object, and I zoom this all the way in. Made it teeny tiny. Wow, something is really, really slow on this machine and causing me a lot of pain. This computer is doing something that I am not quite sure what it's doing. There's something. Well, no, it can usually handle Photoshop and Captivate fairly easily. But it's suffering right now. Oh my gosh, it's like slogging through mud. Ugh. Okay, so I'm changing the size of this image here. Well, it's jumping around because what happens is it's slogging through mud. Yeah. And then once it stops slogging through mud and I'm trying to use the same power on it, it just jumps. Okay, so I have my image here. Now, I transformed it. And if I had not saved it into a smart object and I went ahead and I saved this document, what would happen would be, if I ever wanted to expand that again, it would lose quality. It would deteriorate because that original quality of the image would be gone, and it would have gone down to whatever the resolution was of this image, and it would have lost a lot of information. So by converting to a smart object first, I am able to make a lot of transformations. I can shrink, I can skew, I can size, and the original information of that original document is not lost. So that is the importance of doing that. Now, what does that also mean? That means that you may be creating, when you're saving a document, you create a PSD, but also when you start using smart objects, it starts creating other documents that you'll see, like, what are they? It's Photoshop large document format. I don't remember what they call it, but you'll have the large document format that is actually embedded. So you're getting multiple files. So what you need to do when you are in Photoshop and using this like this is you need to work inside of a folder. So I want you to create a folder for this project, and then all of the elements that are going inside of that inside of this project, like say I have Miley here and I have the class, they should be inside of a folder also. Because otherwise what could happen is you're linking to these. When you make a smart object, you're actually linking to the originals, and you're linking to another document. And if you start moving things around, you're going to lose these links and you'll lose your elements. So always work now inside of a folder with all of your elements inside of that folder with you. And not a lot of other junk inside of that. Okay, so I'm going to go back to this. But since I did do this as a smart object, let me minimize this down. Since I did do this as a smart object, I can tell right here, I have that little square, and I've transformed it. I will ask you, what did you do with that smart object? And you'll be able to say, well, I transformed it. What you can also do is you can add filters and effects. And remember that filters and effects are other things that I want you to do. So I'm going to go ahead and apply a filter to this.
Now, do you need to be able to see them? Because there's going to be filters that you can't see.
No, I will ask you,
Okay.
what did you do? That's why when you bring this project in, you will bring in your PSD also. Don't just bring me the JPEG, because I will ask to see the PSD, because without that, I'm not going to be able to see what's going on here. I can click this filters right here, making sure that I have this layer selected. I'm going to name my layers. Always, always, always name your layers. If your layers are not named, I will dock you. Now I can apply filters to this. Let's say, I don't know, color overlay. If I wanted to turn it pink or something, or I can change what color it is. And now you can see that these effects are going to show up in here. So when I do that and it's applied on a smart object, I can, yes?
Can you go to filter and then go to render and see if it asks you to flatten before you use that?
What it's going to ask, well, yeah, let's show you what it's going to do. It is a little bit different. If you're not used to using smart objects, the process is a little bit different. So what Joseph said for the benefit of the Joe said for the benefit of the video is go to render.
And use the lighting, one of the lighting. Oh, okay, it's not even letting you use it on the smart object.
Right.
The lens flare and the lighting effect.
Right, it's not. But see what it's doing when I do that, it's applying it to the whole picture. So you want to actually just select it and go down here. But you can the other thing you can do, if you want to add lighting effects to a smart object or use some of those things that you couldn't use there, I'm going to open this up and see it's linking to that. And now it's called a PSB, which is a large object. It's that large object that I was talking about. So I can go in here and I can add adjustment layers. Let's say brightening, contrast, and I can add whatever it is I want to add here. It's not even giving me that here, is it? Let's see. Oh my gosh, this is slogging through mud. I don't know. I can add things on here also, having opened that up. And when I have something here, it will actually, since I opened it here and I saved it, seriously? Move. It's really frustrating. If I save it here, it's going to change the picture below. Hold on, let's do this. Okay. Watch. I'm going to save over here. this is really starting to irritate the heck out of me. I'm going to have to expand my Photoshop out of range here. Okay, generally you could move this stuff all over the place so you can see, but it's being really, really stubborn.
Drag it further in the window, just make it smaller.
Yeah. I guess that's what I'm going to have to do. Okay, if I save here, it's going to change. Did you see it change that up there? Because this is my smart object. It's not destroying it in this layer. And then I can always go back to my smart object, which is this. And I can change these effects. I can put a mask on it, whatever I want to do here, and it affects the other layer. So that's the joy of the smart object.
You just double-click the smart object and it opens up?
Yes, I double-clicked the smart object. It opened up in another window. And that is non-destructive. I am not destroying it. Now let's talk about adjustment layers for a second. And here, if I go in...
15 steps down the line, and you're like, oh, I need to readjust that.
Right. Right. 15 steps down the line. Your history's been closed. You've opened and closed a document 12 times already. In previous versions of Photoshop, if you had not done a smart object, there would be no way to revert and go back and correct your errors. Now, using smart objects, you can always go back and fix stuff. You're never stuck. That's what makes smart objects awesome. Okay, let's talk a little bit about layer effects. Well, not layer effects. I want to do adjustment layers right now. Adjustment layers are ways that you can, like I just put filters or effects on here. But let's take a look at adjustment layers. Let's say I want to deal with the brightness and contrast of this. I add an adjustment layer, and I can take the brightness all the way up. Okay. But let's say I don't want to do that on this whole picture. I just want to do Charlotte here. Okay? I only want to affect her. So I can go in and deal with this layer mask. Just like the masking we had shown before. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make that black and white. I'm going to dump on that. Let's dump it and make it black. So I've dealt with my brightness and contrast there. Now I'm going to flip it over and paint on Charlotte. So in this way, I can apply layer masks and things to only what I want to see, or adjustment layers. Pretty cool, right? Now if I go ahead and save this, file, save, I'm going to go back. Whoops. To my other one. Slogging through mud, I tell you. This is terrible. Something is definitely not right with this computer. It's usually not this bad of a situation. Something is running on it or something that I can't see. Okay. Okay, I'm sorry. That is the way you do it. Something is wrong on this computer and it's making my commands a little bit slow and not happening. But another thing I want to talk about is I asked you to do here, okay, use of filter and effects. For the use of filter and effects, I will also take the adjustment layers. And with the adjustment layers, what you also saw me do there was masking. So if you use an adjustment layer with that type of masking that I just did, that was the black and white thing, you actually kill two rubric birds with one stone. Okay? The other way that masking is used is I can add a mask on this like this. And I can hide different parts. Just by showing and hiding. I'm going to flip this back to white and paint. I'm painting here on the mask, masking things down there. So by doing this, I can very easily show and hide different things. I can add an adjustment layer. I don't want to use that particular adjustment layer. That one's not a fun one. Let's see what's a good one.
Do you use a stylus at home?
Hmm?
Do you use a Wacom tablet?
You can.
Do you use it?
I'm not usually for Photoshop.
Yeah.
I usually do for Illustrator.
Illustrator, yeah. But you think it helps pretty good? Because we know where I have problems is when after I pull that figure out of the picture, like the edging
Mm-hmm.
with my laptop. If I had a pencil, you think it'd be a lot easier?
Yeah. Then by all means, use a Wacom pad. Okay, but you can do adjustment layers here like this. I'm having too much struggles with this machine to be able to do it. Okay, layer blending modes. What do I mean by that? That is on the rubric here, layer blending modes. Okay, layer blending modes cause things to blend in with the background layer differently. So let's say I go ahead and I open up Miley here. I'm going to put Miley Cyrus back here. Okay, by going in up here and changing how she blends in with the background, you can see it changing, right?
But you need to drag the bottom layer on top so that way the classroom picture is on top of it. That whole thing.
Well, I'm just demonstrating how. This is obviously not a good visual look for this page. I'm demonstrating the tool. So what it is how does the top image interact with the image below it? That is what a blending thing is. How do those things blend together? So I know for your project you may kind of have a hard time figuring out how you want to do this. But different image types are going to blend differently, and you may have to kind of force it for this particular project, but do try. If you absolutely can't work that into your project, just do it on a separate document so that when I say, okay, where did you do that? You can say I did that on a different one because I couldn't make it work here. And that's okay for me. As long as you're demonstrating the skill somewhere, I'm cool with that. Okay, so masking we already got. Use of blending modes. So text is an easy one, right? I'm going to go in here, click on my tool, my text toolbar. There you go. All of my properties for my text tool, you have to have your text selected for it to work. If you don't select it beforehand, but all your controls are up here in the properties for the tool. Now, if you have cloud, they're saying that you can use any of their fonts in any software. I don't know how that works because it used to just be on the web. I don't know how it works. I haven't done it yet. But, feel free to get creative with this. You can't install fonts on these computers. If you go to somewhere like DeFonts or something and grab a font, you need to put that font inside of the folder with your project. Okay? That it'll have like what is the ending for it? It's not TXT. What is it? TFF or something? TTF, True Type Font. So you have to have that in the folder because when you open it up here, it's going to say where is that font and you can point to it in the folder. So if you are using a funky font, bring the font with you. Okay? Makes sense? But really, that's all there is to it. You should have learned a lot about font in the layout videos. Things like, what did you learn about font? Bold for the title. How many fonts should you use on one page? Two to three max.
All the same color, mainly, I guess.
Yeah, all the same color unless you're trying to highlight, because you can use color to highlight something, a word or whatever, but in general, don't go all crazy with a whole bunch of kinds of fonts. So you learn about things like that in the layout videos. And really, that's all I'm looking for. So if you look at this, that is what I am looking for technically. So I'm looking for the use of smart objects. So that 6 months from now, when your client comes back and says, you know what, could you swap out this text or this person or whatever in this picture, you can go ahead and do that.
Off the top of your head, is there any reason why a smart object wouldn't be good for that layer? Like, off the top of your head that you maybe...
There is absolutely no reason why you would not want to use a smart object anymore.
There's not like some... Like you would... I could use it on a photo, text area.
You can use it on anything. Now, what's going to happen, and always what you want to do is you're going to want to save what everybody calls iterations. So, you're going to get it pretty much the way you want it. Go ahead and save your PSD. And you actually probably want to do a save as, because you may want to have like 5 different PSDs as you go through and make changes, because you never know when one file is going to be corrupt or when you're going to want to back up to another thing. And then, after you have your PSD saved, then you can rasterize your smart objects. If you want to do something like text, for instance, a lot of times wants to be rasterized if you want to put filters and effects and things on it. There may be points in time where you do want to rasterize a layer because you want to do something like your lighting effects, for instance. They have to be on a rasterized layer. So the reason why I don't have filters and effects, what was it, render? Yeah, now if I go in here and I rasterize this particular image.
Right click, rasterize.
Yeah, hold on. Oh, man, this is just killing me. Rasterize layer. Right click, rasterize layer. Now if I go in and I want to see,
but it took away
well, see, it didn't do it. Yeah, it's no longer a smart object that way.
Oh, okay. But I mean, you're not
even in this
able to
case,
see
it's
my
being
layers with PSD.
right. So save your PSDs first.
Maybe should you duplicate that layer first and then rasterize it?
That would be a good idea, actually.
That way
Duplicate it, rasterize it, and then you can shut one of your layers off. Because sometimes different effects and things may not be able to be done. I was thinking that my lens and lighting things would show up here, but I'm not seeing those. Sometimes things cannot be done until the layer is rasterized. And that's why. But yeah, duplicate your layer, keep the smart object. You can shut one off, rasterize the other one, and then you can always go back to that other copy. And that's the way you work non-destructively, because once you rasterize, once you do all of these things, you've killed your ability to make changes to that layer in the future. Make sense? Okay, then you want to save your iterations before you make a bunch of changes. Always make changes, or always save lots of different copies throughout time, because these things do become corrupt. You may delete something by accident, whatever. It's always good to have a copy to go back to, and only lose maybe 2 hours worth of work as opposed to 3 weeks of work, right? So save multiple copies. Okay, that is everything on the rubric. The big part then is using the design and stuff like that. The design skills you learn from the video. Did anybody have any questions before I went on? Okay.